Hi, I'm Jordan Wirfs-Brock, presenting Examining Narrative Sonification, using first-person retrospection methods to translate radio production to interaction design. This is work done with Alli, Laura Devendorf, and Brian Keegan. Sonification is the practice of communicating data through sounds. Think of it as charts and graphs for your ears. There are many ways to do this. For example, you might map quantity onto pitch. So a normal distribution bell curve might sound something like this. Ooh. Just like visualization communicates data through visual marks, sonification communicates data through auditory sounds. And typically, sonification designers focus on non-speech sounds, the bleeps and the bloops, and not the context in which sonifications are delivered. This is a little bit strange. Imagine if visualization designers did the same thing. Graphics might look like this. It's pretty, but what does it even mean? And if I were to slowly reveal some of these scaffolding annotations, it gets much easier for you to understand what this visualization is all about. And yet, this covered up version without annotation, that's how sonifications are often presented to listeners. So, visualization isn't just the marks, it's also the text scaffolds like labels and annotations. Similarly, we wanted to explore how sonification isn't just non-speech sounds, but also how it includes speech-based scaffolds, like spoken narration. We call this combination of sonification and speech-based scaffolds narrative sonification. And to explore the role of narrative context, we turn to a medium with a long and rich tradition of spoken narrative: radio. We created sonifications for the radio show Marketplace and analyzed them to understand how they work. The goal of this study is to examine our practices as sound designers and radio producers so that we can translate that tacit and implicit knowledge into extensible interaction design principles for emerging technologies. We explored three key research questions. 1, how can narrative help people learn to listen to data? 2, what can interaction designers developing emerging tech, like voice interfaces, learn from radio? And 3, how can we use retrospection to support interaction design? In this video, I'll be focusing on findings addressing the first 2 questions. Here's an overview of our research process. First, we made the radio sonifications, then we retrospectively analyzed these radio pieces and our process of creating them, and finally, we speculated how we might reimagine those radio pieces as voice interactions. This study deals with 2 radio sonification pieces from the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, one on the volatility of the stock market, the other on unemployment claims. Today, I'll be focusing on this second radio piece. In the spring of 2020, as we first saw the economic impacts of COVID-19, unemployment claims in the US were staggering. In this New York Times visualization, they used the entire front page gutter to extend the y-axis. With such a mind-boggling jump in scale, we grappled with how to convey that data through sound without blowing out your eardrums. Ultimately, we represented new unemployment claims with a harp sound, with a higher pitch for more claims. And we represented continuing claims, that's the total number of people on unemployment benefits at any given time, with a series of layered drum sounds. We then embedded these sonifications into a radio interview for Marketplace, where we taught listeners how to understand and interpret the sounds through a dialogue. Here's a diagram of the narrative structure of that radio piece. I'm going to play a short excerpt where we first hear the whole sonification to produce an auditory gestalt, and then the host, Kai Risdal, tees up the training session we're about to have.
We really like the idea of economic data that you could hear. So we called her back to ask her about unemployment, those incredible first-time claims numbers we've been reporting on since March, and the related continuing claims for unemployment benefits. And here's what she sent us. All right, so that is what unemployment in this economy sounded like from February to the beginning of this month. But since most of us aren't really used to listening to data, we have gotten Jordan back on the phone to help sort it all out for us. Jordan, thanks for coming back on.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Okay, so as we did last time, we're going to break this down because it was really interesting to me in our previous conversation how you had to teach me how to listen, and thus we taught everybody else together how to listen. So
that's right.
Talk to me first of all about the new first-time claims for unemployment. What are those sounds?
Yeah, so to break this down, from there, we went on to decompose the sonification. Then we put it back together so listeners could hear it again with new ears. And finally, apply those new listening skills to new data from the Great Recession of 2009. Now, we came up with this narrative structure somewhat on the fly, using our intuition as sound designers and radio storytellers. So to better understand the radio sonification pieces and our process of making them, we conducted a rigorous, multifaceted, first-person retrospection process outlined here. It included reflective writing, close listening, analytic sketching, and applying a theoretical framework. You can see our paper for further details. Here are some of the themes that emerged through this process, and I'm going to focus on 3 of them. 1, our relationship to time, 2, narrative multiplicity, and finally 3, data literacy as an act of interpreting and creating. Time is fundamental to the nature of sound, which is linear and ephemeral. With radio, you cannot pause and you cannot go back. As a sound designer, I was trying to compress time to make the sonifications faster so that they would take up less of it. Whereas the radio producer, Alli, was quite focused on slowing things down, on stretching time. But as we realized we were working toward the same goal, which was manipulating time to make room for the narrative. Narrative that could help the listener learn to understand the sonifications. In these radio sonifications, narrative served as a bridge between the past and the future. It could harken back, reminding the listener of what they just heard, or foreshadow the future. And by labeling the sounds with words, we could help listeners remember and compare them. There were many different kinds of narratives at play here. The story of the impacts of COVID-19, the story of the data and how to interpret it, and the story of my journey as a sound designer creating these sonifications. And this last one is intriguing because it's something I would have edited out, but the radio producer, Alli, thought it was important for the audience to hear it. This story of how I interpreted and created the sonifications illustrates an important concept of data literacy, which is that literacy combines both theoretical knowledge, say how a chart functions, with procedural knowledge, how to actually make a chart. To be truly data literate, you have to be able to both read and write visualizations. And so we speculated how we might apply this to sonification literacy using voice interfaces. An interactive version of the unemployment sonification might first play a sound clip, then the voice assistant would ask you to interpret it. Were the unemployment claims going up or down? Then it might ask you to creatively extend this idea to make your own sonification. What do you think unemployment claims sounded like when the dot-com bubble burst back in 2001? These design insights lay the groundwork for future interactive sonifications that can support data literacy through acts of creation. And these kinds of voice technologies we're planning to continue prototyping and deploying in the future. Thank you so much.